It all began with what seemed like a harmless comment, something I initially brushed off as a joke. We were both at work. For those unfamiliar, Emily and I share a workplace. In fact, she's not just a colleague, she's also my boss. I realized that signing up for a relationship with that kind of power dynamic was never going to be simple. Despite this, we had always managed to keep our professional and personal lives in separate lanes. Or at least, that was what I believed. Then came the moment that changed everything. Right there in front of our coworkers, Emily smirked and blurted out, "You're useless. I'm taking your paycheck." Her voice carried the familiar teasing edge, and the room erupted in laughter. Everyone assumed it was playful banter between a married couple. I laughed too, although there was a nervous undertone to it. Inside, something about it felt deeply unsettling. Emily was known for her sharp wit, but this time it didn't feel lighthearted. It felt targeted, and the conviction in her voice sent a chill through me. I tried to let it slide. With Emily, if you dwelled on every sarcastic remark, you'd go mad. But the comment clung to me like a thorn under the skin. After that day, little things began to shift. At first, they were easy to dismiss. She started leaving the house earlier than usual, not strange in itself, but she did it without saying a word. Our mornings, once shared over casual breakfasts or quick conversations, turned into solitary silence. I'd wake up to find the bed empty and the house quiet, a sense of absence hanging in the air. Things weren't much better at work. There was a time when we'd share fleeting glances across the office, exchange discreet smiles that made the day feel less monotonous. But now she hardly acknowledged me. It was as if I had faded into the background of her world. One afternoon, I went to discuss a project we were collaborating on. I knocked on her door and heard her voice through the wooden panel. Something about her tone caught me off guard. When I opened the door, she was reclined in her chair, whispering into her phone with a playful expression on her face, an expression I hadn't seen aimed at me in a long time. Her eyes met mine and, in an instant, the smile disappeared. "Oh, it's you," she said, her voice carrying the same tone she'd used for an unimportant visitor. It felt like I was some junior staffer, not her husband. Trying to keep things professional despite the knot in my stomach, I said I wanted to review the figures for the fourth quarter report. I felt ridiculous for even bothering. She waved me off with a distracted motion, her attention still fixed on the call. "Later, Michael." "I'm busy," she murmured, sounding more irritated than apologetic. She didn't meet my eyes again, just kept tapping her phone, smiling softly at whoever was on the other end. That encounter unsettled me for the rest of the day. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Was it just a business call? Or something more intimate? Her demeanor had felt too relaxed, too personal. A few days later, things took a sharp turn. We had managed to align our schedules and planned to meet for lunch, a rare treat. I arrived at the restaurant as agreed, but Emily never showed up. I sent her a message, no response. I called straight to voicemail. After sitting there for nearly an hour, I decided to head back to work. That's when I saw her. She was walking out of a nearby cafe, arm-linked with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, well-built, and dressed in a sleek, expensive-looking suit, the kind that screams power and status. They were laughing together, standing too close, leaning in like teenagers on a romantic date. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I didn't approach. I couldn't. I just stood frozen and watched as she kissed him on the cheek, completely unbothered, as if she weren't married, as if I didn't exist. Then she walked away with him, still smiling. I turned and walked in the opposite direction, my thoughts spinning. Who was he? Was this just a casual lunch? Every instinct in me said no. But I clung to the hope that she would have an explanation, something that made sense. Maybe she'd laugh and call me paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking it. That evening, she came home later than usual, trailing the scent of fine wine and a perfume she never wore. I casually asked about her lunch plans. She gave a nonchalant shrug and said she had a last-minute client meeting. "Sorry, babe. Things are just hectic with work," she added without skipping a beat. She didn't flinch. Her lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly it stunned me. I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I felt like I was staring at a stranger. Still, I smiled, placed a kiss on her forehead, and told her it was fine. Inside, though, I was drowning. Whatever this was, it wasn't about work stress. Something else was unfolding, something that would pull me right into the eye of the storm. After seeing Emily with that man, I couldn't shake the image from my mind. My thoughts were a constant whirlwind. Every time she smiled at her phone or her screen lit up, I felt my skin crawl. I wanted to confront her and ask directly who that man was. But I knew Emily. If I confronted her without any solid proof, she'd simply twist the situation and somehow make it my fault. She had a talent for that. Spinning stories in a way that left you questioning your own sanity. making you feel like the villain for even doubting her. So I kept my cool on the outside, masking the storm building inside me. Quietly, I started looking into things. I didn't want to stoop to the level of checking her messages or emails. It felt degrading even considering it. Still, the thought kept gnawing at me. One evening, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone from the dresser. My hands trembled as though I were committing a crime. When I unlocked it, there was nothing out of place. No odd texts, no strange names in her contact list, no hints that would point to the truth. Just emails related to work, a few group chats with her friends, and some harmless messages on Instagram. Everything looked spotless, almost suspiciously so. Instead of feeling relief, I was overwhelmed by guilt. I hated myself for not trusting her. Even though I couldn't shake the image of her laughing and touching that guy like they were longtime lovers. I needed answers. That's when I had a realization. Emily was far too careful to leave clues on her phone. If she was hiding something, it wouldn't be there. She was smarter than that. So I began to notice the smaller things. She had this older work laptop, stored in the corner of her home office, collecting dust. I couldn't recall the last time she'd actually used it, but something told me to take a look. One night, after she left for drinks with her coworkers, I took my chance. The laptop was password protected, but I knew her well enough to guess the combination after a few attempts. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but by then, the need to know had consumed me. I opened her email first, same story as the phone. Everything looked professional. But then I came across a folder, tucked away under a bland name, Receipts and Documents. Initially, I assumed it was filled with boring work files. But as soon as I opened it, my stomach dropped. It wasn't spreadsheets or invoices. It was photos, dozens of them. Emily, with the same man from before, sitting at a bar, cozy on his lap in a hotel room, wearing a dress I'd never seen her in, leaning in for a kiss that clearly wasn't mine. Couldn't breathe. The ground beneath me seemed to vanish. There was no more wondering or trying to rationalize. She was involved with someone else. And this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It had clearly been happening for a while. I had just been too blind to notice. I sat frozen, staring at those images as they branded themselves into my memory. I kept thinking, how long had this been going on? How many times had she lied? All while looking me in the eye like everything was normal. And the worst part? I could already hear her voice in my head, trying to downplay it all, claiming it didn't mean anything. But that wasn't going to work on me anymore. This time, I wouldn't let her make me doubt what I had seen with my own eyes. When she walked through the door later that night, she was all cheerful energy, overly friendly, even as if she was trying to keep my attention off something. We sat on the couch as she recounted her night out, laughing over some story about a coworker. I listened in silence, biting back every emotion, my fists clenched tight. Her words made my blood boil, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. I was going to wait until I had the right words, until I was ready to flip her world upside down, just like she had done to mine. But I didn't expect what came next. She leaned in close, placed a hand gently on my shoulder, and said something that caught me completely off guard. She told me she thought we should take a break. I just stared at her, stunned. I asked what she meant by that, and she responded with this calm, almost condescending smile, like she was explaining something to a child. She said I'd been distant lately, and maybe we both needed time apart to figure things out. The irony of it almost made me laugh. If I hadn't been so angry. Me distant? And now she was flipping the blame on me as if I were the problem. I repeated her word, space, barely able to keep my frustration out of my voice. She nodded again, truly convinced she was being reasonable. She said some time apart might help us clear our heads. My pulse pounded in my ears. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to lay out the pictures, the betrayal, everything. But I paused. Her calm demeanor, the confidence in her voice. It made me stop. She was strategizing. This was a move in her game. And I wasn't going to let her win, not this easily. So I took a slow breath, forced a smile, and agreed. If that's what she wanted, I said, then fine. Her surprise was obvious. She didn't expect me to go along with it so easily. But she nodded in approval, saying it would be good for both of us. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't giving her space. I was preparing to dismantle the illusion she'd built. This wasn't about saving our marriage anymore. It was about revealing the truth about who she really was, and I was going to make sure she never saw it coming. After Emily dropped the break bomb on me, I knew I had to play it smart. I knew she was hiding something, and there was no chance I would let her slip away without facing the consequences. I had the evidence, clear as day, but I wasn't ready to reveal it just yet. Not while she still believed she had the upper hand. The following days were an odd mix of forced smiles and thick, unspoken tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud. Emily carried on as though nothing had shifted, as if we weren't on the edge of something irreversible. She still offered to make dinner, still gave me those rehearsed smiles that never reached her eyes. But now, every time her fingers brushed her phone screen or she headed out for drinks with colleagues, I saw right through it. I knew exactly what she was doing, and it turned my stomach. There was no way I was going to sit around and allow her to keep doing this. If she needed a wake-up call, I was ready to give her one. I started crafting a plan. If she wanted to play mind games, I'd show her I could play smarter. That weekend, she mentioned a trip out of town for a supposed business conference. She said it would be a few days, something to do with networking. As she packed, she even kissed me on the cheek, playing the role of the devoted spouse. But I knew the truth. I was well aware of where she was heading and who she was planning to be with. That so-called conference was just another getaway with her sharply dressed companion. Still, I didn't say a word. I simply watched her leave, pretending to be oblivious. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, I took action. My first move was to call Jeff, an old friend who knew how to stay calm under pressure. He's the kind of person you want in your corner when emotions are clouding your judgment. I needed someone like that, someone who could cut through the fog and help me see clearly. When I explained everything, Jeff wasn't shocked in the slightest. "I've been telling you for years," he said matter-of-factly. "She's got a cold side to her. But if you're ready to walk away, you'll need to do it right." So that's exactly what we set out to do, build a strategy that would hit her where it really counted. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It had turned into a matter of self-respect, control over my own life, and even my financial future. Emily wasn't just my spouse. She was also my superior at work. We were employed at the same company, but she held a higher position, which meant she had influence over things like my salary. That's why her remark at the office, when she scoffed and said, "You're useless, I'm taking your paycheck," wasn't just a cruel joke. It was a warning, one I couldn't ignore. Then Jeff floated an idea so unexpected that I had to pause and really let it sink in. "Why don't you quit?" he suggested. "Catch her off guard. Take away her leverage before she even sees it coming." At first, I hesitated. Walking away from my job felt like a huge step. But the more I considered it, the more it seemed like the right move. Emily's greatest weapon wasn't just her manipulation at home. It was her power over me in the office. If I stripped that away, her control would vanish. And knowing Emily, nothing unsettled her more than losing control. So, the very next day I went into work. With her still out of town, I didn't have to see her face. I wrote up my resignation, kept it strictly professional, no drama, no emotion, just facts. I submitted it to Human Resources, and just like that, I was free from that part of her hold. But I wasn't finished. That evening, I sent her a brief message. "We need to talk when you get back." Her response came quickly, casual as ever. "Of course. Everything okay?" I left her hanging, didn't reply, let her sit in the silence, wondering. When she finally came home from her so-called conference, I made sure to be there, acting relaxed and unbothered. She rolled her suitcase into the house, a bit tanner than before, probably from lounging at some resort pool while I stayed behind, stewing in frustration. She offered me a cheerful smile and said, "Hey, babe, did you miss me?" "Yeah, sure," I replied flatly. She raised an eyebrow, clearly picking up on the shift in my tone, but unaware of what was coming. "You sounded strange in your message. What's going on?" Without a word, I reached for my phone and pulled up the photos I had discovered on her laptop. I selected one, crisp and unmistakable, of her and the other man, comfortably nestled together in what was clearly a hotel room. I slid the phone across the table toward her. Her complexion turned pale the instant she saw it. The confident expression she wore like armor dissolved instantly. Her voice faltered as she spoke. "What is this supposed to be?" "You tell me," I said, calm and composed. "Looks like your networking event involved more than shaking hands." Her eyes darted between the image and my face. I could practically see the gears turning as she scrambled to come up with some excuse. "This isn't what you think, Michael. You're reading into it. This is ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" I almost chuckled. "It's a picture of you in a hotel room with someone else. What exactly do you think I'm misunderstanding here?" She didn't reply immediately. Her expression stiffened. "So, that's it? You're willing to throw everything away over a few photographs?" Her voice was sharp, defensive. "You don't even know the full story. Then why don't you enlighten me?" I shot back, my voice now edged with frustration. "Go ahead. Tell me why you've been dishonest for months. Why you've been sneaking around with him behind my back." She folded her arms, a familiar gesture I recognized. Her usual move before she tried to justify herself. "I've been miserable, Michael," she confessed. "You don't get what it's like being in a relationship with you. There's no strength in you, no challenge. You're just there. I needed more. Something different." Her words landed like a blow to the chest. She wasn't even attempting to deny it anymore. Instead, she was laying the blame at my feet, as if her betrayal was somehow my doing. "And you think that makes what you did acceptable?" I asked, my tone rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Because you weren't happy. That gave you the right to lie to my face every single day? To drag me through this mess without even giving me the chance to make it right?" She didn't blink. Her face remained cold and unmoved. "Fix it?" she scoffed. "Michael, you can't repair something that's been broken for years. We've been finished for a long time. I was just the only one willing to admit it." I looked at her, emotions clashing inside me. Anger, disbelief, and something heavier. Resignation. "That's fine," I said, my voice lower now, more controlled. "Because I'm done. The job, this marriage, everything. I'm walking away." Her expression shifted to surprise, eyes wide with shock. "What do you mean you're done?" she asked, stepping closer. "I handed in my resignation," I said simply. "You don't get to pull the strings anymore, Emily. I'm not a piece in your game." She stood there, completely still. For once, she had no words, and that moment gave me a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I grabbed my keys, stepped out the door, and ignored the phone buzzing in my pocket as she tried to reach me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had reclaimed control of my life. I didn't glance back as I walked away from the house that night. My head was spinning, my chest tight, but oddly enough, I felt lighter. I was finally free from the web of manipulation and deceit that had defined our relationship for so long. I drove aimlessly for hours, not sure where I was going, just knowing I needed distance. Eventually, I ended up at Jeff's place. When he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't ask questions. He knew something major had gone down. "She knows?" I muttered, stepping inside and collapsing onto his couch. Jeff raised an eyebrow and leaned against the frame of the door. "So, how did it all go down?" I let out a bitter laugh. She didn't even try to hide it. Instead, she had the nerve to turn it all back on me, like I somehow pushed her into doing it. Jeff shook his head. "She's unbelievable. But hey, at least you're out now, right? You told her." "Yeah," I nodded. "I laid it all out. Walked out before she could twist things again." He patted me on the back. "Good. It's about time you let go of that burden. You deserve way better." I agreed with him even if my heart hadn't caught up yet. The adrenaline from the confrontation was wearing off, and now reality crept in. What was next? No job, no marriage, no clear direction, just the hollow remains of what once was. For a while, I sat there in silence, eyes locked on the ceiling, trying to figure out how things had unraveled so quickly. The next morning hit hard. My phone was flooded with missed calls and messages from Emily. I expected it, but seeing her name pop up still hurt. The text started calmly, "We need to talk. Please call me back." But as I kept ignoring her, the tone shifted. "Are you seriously acting like a child? You're really throwing everything away because of this?" And then the final blow. "If you won't respond, I'm coming to Jeff's. We're not done." I showed the messages to Jeff, who shook his head in disbelief. "She's not backing off, is she?" "Nope," I replied with a sigh, tossing the phone onto the table. She never could handle not being in control. The second she feels like she's losing grip, she just explodes. As if on cue, less than an hour later, there was a knock on the door. I didn't need to check, I already knew it was her. Jeff opened the door, and there she was, her expression intense and unwavering. "We need to talk," she said, her tone steady but low. Jeff looked over at me. I nodded. I wasn't going to dodge this, not anymore. I walked to the doorway, arms crossed, leaning against the frame. "What is it that you want, Emily?" She stepped inside, locking eyes with me. "I need to understand why you're doing this. Why you're tossing away everything we built over what I still believe is a misunderstanding." That made me laugh, a hollow, disbelieving sound. "A misunderstanding?" I repeated. "You honestly think that's all this is?" "I saw the photos, Emily. I know what you've been doing." She rolled her eyes, as if I was the irrational one here. "I told you already, it's not how it seems. He's just someone I work with. Things got a little messy, but it never meant anything." "There it is," I said, shaking my head slowly. "The classic excuse, it didn't mean anything. Do you even hear what you're saying? Do you think I'm that naive?" "No, Michael, I don't think that," she said, her voice softening as though trying to de-escalate the situation. "I just think you're letting your emotions get the best of you. Lately, the pressure had been suffocating, and maybe I had made some poor choices along the way. Still, that didn't justify throwing everything we had built away." I looked at her, disbelief etched across my face. She wasn't even trying to admit the truth. Instead, she was crafting another version of events, another layer of deception meant to cloud my judgment. "I already let it all go," I said, keeping my tone even. "I've walked away. The job, you, all of it. If being with him is what you want, or if it's something else entirely, go ahead. But I won't be a part of this twisted cycle any longer." Her demeanor changed instantly. The softness vanished, replaced by sharp irritation. "You just quit? Are you actually serious right now? Do you understand how incredibly foolish that was? You can't abandon everything because of one small misstep." My jaw tightened as I struggled to keep calm. "A small misstep? You've been lying to me for months, Emily. Deceiving me. Hiding things. That's not some tiny error, it's betrayal." She scoffed. "You're being overly dramatic, Michael. You know full well I've been carrying the burden of this relationship for years. You've been stuck, completely unmotivated. I needed something different, something more than this lifeless, dead-end marriage. And yet I stayed. I was still trying, still putting in the effort even when it felt like she had already checked out." That realization hit me hard, like a sudden blow to the chest. Her words were meant to hurt, and they did. I stood frozen, her last comment echoing in my head. "Not enough?" I finally found the strength to respond, my voice trembling. "You really think that cheating on me somehow makes you the one who's hurting? That I failed because I wasn't rising up some corporate ladder fast enough to impress you?" She didn't offer a response. Her silence was louder than words. "I quit because I'm done playing by your rules," I continued, now with more confidence in my voice. "You took advantage of me, lied to me, drained everything from me, and now you're angry because you can't manipulate me anymore. But I won't allow you to make me feel like a failure just because I didn't meet your unrealistic expectations." Her face went cold, that familiar calculating look settling in. "If that's what you want, Michael, then fine. Walk away. But don't expect any sympathy when you fall apart. You'll be back. Crawling. And it'll be too late." I met her glare, no longer angry, just drained. The exhaustion was deeper than anything I'd ever felt. "I'm not coming back this time, Emily. Not now. Not ever." Without another word, she spun around and slammed the door behind her. Jeff had been standing quietly in the corner, arms folded, watching the entire exchange unfold. He let out a low whistle. "Man, she didn't hold back, huh?" he said, eyebrows raised. I gave a small nod and sank into the couch, the weight of everything finally settling on my shoulders. I'd stood my ground, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like I'd just lost everything, my marriage, my job, and the future I thought was mine. Still, beneath the heartbreak and fatigue, something unfamiliar stirred, a faint but undeniable sense of freedom. I wasn't under her control anymore. Her lies no longer dictated my life. For the first time in a long while, I was truly free. And that realization? It terrified me. In the days that followed Emily's dramatic exit, everything began to collapse at once. The adrenaline from standing up for myself faded quickly, and what remained was a gnawing emptiness. The house echoed with silence, a silence I hadn't anticipated. So much of my daily life had been built around her, even in the smallest ways. Her shoes at the doorway, the clatter of her keyboard late into the night, the lingering scent of her perfume on the couch. All of it had vanished, and with it, the version of life I thought I knew. But the fallout wasn't just emotional. It was brutally practical. I had walked away from my job, and that reality was setting in hard. Emily and I had worked at the same place for years, and while I knew the company well, I also knew she'd waste no time turning everyone there against me. She had the upper hand, the influence, the network. And me? I was just another unemployed guy trying to figure out what came next. Jeff did his best to keep me positive. "It's gonna be tough, man, but you made the right call," he told me. "You couldn't keep living under her thumb. Now's your shot to figure out what you want." The problem was I had no idea what that even meant. My career had been wrapped so tightly around hers for so long that I'd lost all sense of who I was outside of being her husband or her subordinate. But sitting around feeling sorry for myself wouldn't fix anything, so I threw myself into job applications, if only to distract from the mess my personal life had become. And then the texts started coming. Not as frequently. Not as angry. Something had changed. Emily had shifted from confrontation to strategy. It was like she had entered a new phase in her game. "We should talk. I'm sorry it got so heated. Maybe we can find a way through this. It doesn't have to be over." Then came the one that made me laugh, a bitter, hollow laugh. "Michael, you know you'll never find anyone who understands you like I do." This was typical Emily. When everything else failed, she'd fall back on the one move she knew worked, playing the no one else would want me card. She had this uncanny talent for twisting things, making it seem like I was the lucky one just for being with her, even when she was the one doing the damage. But I had stopped buying into it. Not this time. I ignored her messages and erased them without even opening them. It was just easier to deal with things that way. Still, ignoring her didn't mean I was unaffected. Around 2 weeks after she left, I found myself lying on Jeff's couch late one night, staring blankly at the ceiling. That's when my phone rang. I expected it to be her again, but it wasn't. It was my mom. "Michael," she said, her voice low but carrying that unmistakable tone that told me she sensed something was off. "We need to talk. I've been hearing some things." Already dreading what was coming, I responded, "Mom, everything's fine." But she wasn't convinced. "No, it's not. I know things between you and Emily are rough, but that doesn't mean you can shut the world out. Your sister called me. She saw something on Facebook. People are starting to talk, Michael." That made me sit upright. Facebook? What was going on there? "I don't know what people are saying. It's just messy right now," I replied, hoping to brush it off. "Messy?" Her voice sharpened. "Michael, she's posting photos. With another man. There's a whole thread." I didn't want to believe it, but I checked myself. "She's out in public like none of what you two had ever mattered." A cold wave settled in my chest. I already knew what she meant, but still, I asked, "What pictures?" "She's flaunting him," my mom replied, concern lacing her voice. "I'm sending them to you. I'm really worried, Michael. You need someone to talk to. You shouldn't try to handle this by yourself." After hanging up, I sat there, phone in hand, waiting. When the images finally loaded, it felt like my entire body went numb. There she was, Emily, dressed up and laughing inside a posh-looking restaurant, her hand resting on that same guy's shoulder. They looked inseparable. The captions were the hardest part to stomach. She wasn't being subtle about it either. Things like "finally living my best life" and "found a real man" filled the space beneath the pictures. And worse? People were chiming in. Some of our mutual friends were even cheering her on, praising her for moving on, tossing around jokes like she'd made some kind of impressive upgrade. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the comments. Each one landed like a blow, not just because of the betrayal, but because of the sheer public humiliation. This wasn't just her moving on, she was parading it. It was like I'd become some blurry, irrelevant chapter in her story. I flung my phone across the room, hearing it crash against the wall. I didn't care. I was overflowing with pain, anger, and the raw unfairness of it all. She had taken so much, our marriage, my job, and now even my dignity, and she seemed to be enjoying every second of it. Jeff came into the room and saw me, shaking and sitting amid the silence. "What's going on?" he asked. "She's throwing it all over social media," I managed through clenched teeth. "Like none of it ever mattered. Like I never meant anything." Jeff's face grew stern. "She's trying to mess with your head, man. She knows this is going to hurt. That's the point. She wants a reaction." Don't let her win. I don't know how not to, I said quietly, my voice barely holding together. She's tearing me apart and acting like it's the best thing that's ever happened to her. He sat beside me. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. She'll keep pushing because deep down, she's losing control. You're not running back to her, and that's making her desperate. Hold your ground. Don't let her decide how this ends. I inhaled deeply, trying to let his words land. But it wasn't easy. Emily had been such a huge part of my world, and now she was trying to erase me completely. It felt like she was rewriting the entire history between us. Like I was nothing more than a temporary step toward whatever happiness she was chasing. I don't know how to move past this, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Everything in my life has her fingerprints on it. Now it all feels like it's vanished. You start over, Jeff said firmly. It's going to be hard. No getting around that. But you rebuild from scratch. You learn who you are outside of her. And trust me, when you make it through this, you'll be stronger than ever. I really wanted to believe that. I needed to. But sitting there, surrounded by the emotional wreckage of everything I thought I had, it was tough to imagine piecing my life back together. Still, one thing had become painfully clear. I wasn't going to let Emily break me. Not entirely. Not again. Sleep was impossible that night. Every time I shut my eyes, those images flashed through my mind. Emily's smiling face, her arm draped over that man like he was some grand prize. The fury inside me wouldn't settle. It just kept bubbling, no matter how hard I tried to push it down. Jeff had warned me not to give her the reaction she wanted, but resisting that urge was a battle in itself. I could feel what she was trying to do. She wanted to see me fall apart. She was clearly provoking me, attempting to lure me into a very public outburst so she could twist the narrative and make me out to be the resentful, pitiful ex-husband. It was all part of a larger plan, a tactic to reassert dominance. She no longer had power over me at the office. Our marriage, once her arena of manipulation, was now over. This, then, was her final weapon, public shame. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling as thoughts raced through my mind. I couldn't just sit there and allow her to rewrite the entire story of our marriage, casting herself as the victim and me as the villain. She had no right to do that, but reacting emotionally would only give her more ammunition. If I was going to respond, it had to be calculated. The following morning, I came to a clear decision. I wasn't going to engage with her on social media. Trading insults or reacting to her provocative posts would only pull me into her drama. That's exactly what she was hoping for. No, I had something better in mind. I would strike where it mattered most to her, her pride. I reached out to a lawyer. My knowledge of divorce law was limited, but I knew enough to realize I needed someone strategic, someone ready to fight fire with fire if necessary. Financially, Emily held the advantage. She earned more, had wider connections, and likely assumed she could dominate me in court. But I wasn't going to roll over. My lawyer, Karen, had a sharp mind, like someone who could predict every move in a chess match. I laid out everything. Our joint finances, our house, the fact that Emily had once been my boss. Karen listened without surprise. After I explained the situation, she told me, "You have more leverage than you think." She pointed out that Emily's decision to share her affair online was actually beneficial. It clearly illustrated her behavior and could influence how assets were divided. I took in her words carefully, though a sense of unease still lingered. "What about my job?" I asked. "I may have quit, but she still has influence in the company. I don't want her ruining my chances elsewhere." Karen gave me a confident smile, her expression sharp. "We'll handle that too," she assured me. "She'll have a hard time justifying why she's dragging your name through the mud while you've remained silent. We'll make sure you walk away with your fair share, maybe even more." For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control returning. Karen crafted a strategy focused on securing an equitable settlement, emphasizing how Emily's actions had harmed both our marriage and my career prospects. Her advice was simple: stay quiet, let Emily continue exposing herself, and be ready to act at the right moment. Still, even with a solid legal strategy, the bitterness remained. Emily had already gotten away with too much, and I wanted her to face consequences. She believed she was invincible, but I knew her better than anyone else. I knew what she treasured most, her reputation, the image of being a flawless, accomplished woman. That was her soft spot. That was where I'd strike. Later that week, I began setting my own plan in motion. I reached out to people from our past, old friends Emily had long since abandoned in her pursuit of status and success. While she had moved on from those connections, I had not. One of them was Daniel, a college friend who now worked in public relations. He still owed me a favor, and I knew this was the time to cash it in. Daniel and I met for drinks, and I laid everything out. The affair, the social media spectacle, and how she was presenting herself as a brave, empowered woman, conveniently leaving out the damage she'd caused. Daniel didn't need convincing. He'd never been fond of Emily and always saw her as someone who exploited others for her own benefit. When I finished explaining, he gave me a knowing look. "So, you want to take her down a notch?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "Not exactly," I replied. "I just want the truth to come out. She's built her success on deception, and I'm finished playing the silent party." Daniel nodded and took a slow sip of his drink. "All right, I can work with that. I'll start stirring the waters. But make sure you stay silent. Let the story catch up to her." And that's exactly what I did. Over the next several weeks, Daniel began releasing bits of information in a discreet but strategic way. Nothing overly dramatic, just enough to make people question the image Emily had worked so hard to build. He began by shedding light on her professional behavior, how she stepped on others to get ahead. Then, he subtly referenced the affair, framing it as something that had been quietly tolerated even though our marriage was still legally intact. It wasn't slander, it was truth, presented in a way that invited people to draw their own conclusions. And soon, the whispers began. Although Emily had plenty of fans, she also had more than a few critics. People who had been waiting for a crack in her polished exterior. Once that initial crack in her carefully constructed image appeared, others were more than eager to help split it wide open. The breaking point came when someone from our former company anonymously shared an in-depth post, revealing how Emily had maneuvered her way into a leadership role, leveraging her connection with me to climb the ladder. The post quickly made waves within our professional circle. It didn't take long for hushed comments to morph into widespread speculation. Emily's meticulously maintained reputation began to unravel in real time. I wasn't reveling in her downfall or feeling triumphant. But if I said it didn't bring a sense of relief to finally see things start to shift in my direction, I'd be lying. For so long, she'd held all the control, always steps ahead. Now she was clearly struggling to keep up. A few days passed before I heard from her. When the call came, I could tell immediately something had changed. Her voice lacked its usual composure and confidence. "Michael, we need to talk," she said. Her words tense, her tone uncertain. I leaned back in my chair, inhaling deeply before answering. "What do you want to talk about?" "I know what you're doing," she said sharply. Though the edge in her voice was more from anxiety than anger, she was clearly unsettled. "You've been spreading things about me, trying to ruin my reputation. It has to stop." There was a trace of panic in her words, but it didn't reach me like it used to. I wasn't overwhelmed anymore. I didn't feel like I was being dragged under. "I haven't said anything that isn't true, Emily," I replied, keeping my voice even and composed. "People are just finally seeing who you really are." She was quiet for a while. When she did speak again, her voice had lost some of its hardness. "I don't want to keep doing this back and forth. Maybe we can figure something out. It doesn't have to end so badly." I couldn't help but let out a small, bitter laugh. "I wasn't the one who made it ugly, Emily. That was all you." There was a long silence on the line. I half expected her to hang up. Instead, she let out a deep sigh. "You really want to see me fall, don't you?" I paused, thinking about all the ways she had twisted the truth, played the victim, and dragged me through emotional turmoil. Then I answered, calmly and without hesitation. "I don't need to bring you down, Emily. You're already doing that yourself." And with that I ended the call. It felt like something heavy had lifted off my chest. There was no more bitterness, no lingering rage. I felt free. Done with the drama, done with the endless cycle. Most importantly, I was done with her. That final conversation marked a turning point. Slowly, the resentment and obsession with payback started to dissolve. For so long, I'd been caught up in trying to balance the scales to reclaim what she had taken. But now I saw things more clearly. It wasn't about winning. It was about letting go. Emily had been like a storm in my life, tearing through everything I valued. But now, the storm had moved on. And for the first time in ages, I was left with something new, clarity. Over the following weeks, I poured my energy into rebuilding my life from the ground up. Jeff was always there, a steady hand reminding me to stay the course and avoid falling back into the chaos Emily often brought. Meanwhile, my attorney, Karen, was managing the divorce proceedings. Each update she delivered seemed to bring better news than the last. Thanks to the public fallout Emily had created for herself, Karen secured a settlement that far exceeded my expectations. I would keep the house and there would be no spousal support or prolonged court disputes. Emily wasn't in a position to fight anymore. Her credibility had taken too severe a hit. It was surreal watching everything slowly align after months of anxiety, confusion, and emotional upheaval. A future without Emily finally felt real, not just imagined. Yet, despite everything falling into place, I still had the sense that something remained unresolved. One evening, I was sitting on the back porch, lost in thought as I gazed out over the yard when my phone buzzed. I assumed it was either Karen with an update or Jeff checking in. But it wasn't either of them. It was Emily. Her message was brief, but it hit me hard. Can we meet? Just once more. I stared at those words for a while, frozen. Every part of me knew I should let it go, let her become part of a closed chapter. But something about her message felt different. No accusations, no passive-aggressive jabs. Just a plain, unadorned request. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I sat quietly, turning it over in my mind. Then I spoke, slowly and clearly. Emily, this isn't just about what you did with someone else. It's not just about deception. You didn't only shatter our marriage. You shattered everything I believed we had. You made me feel small, insignificant. Like I was only a convenience in your life. She recoiled slightly, guilt flooding her expression. I know, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I know what I did, and I'm truly sorry. We sat in silence, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. Part of me wanted to lash out, to make her feel a fraction of the pain I'd been carrying. But another part, one exhausted by anger, just longed for release. I don't hate you, Emily, I finally said. But I'm finished. I'm finished with all of it, the lies, the manipulation, the emotional games. I can't have you in my life anymore. This will be the last time we meet like this. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. But she didn't resist or argue. For once, she accepted what I said. I understand, she replied quietly, wiping away a tear. I really do. We remained seated for a few more moments, both absorbing the finality of it all. Then, without saying anything else, I stood up. I walked out of the cafe, leaving Emily behind along with the emotional wreckage she had caused. It was truly over. As I stepped outside, the evening air brushed against my face, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I experienced a sense of liberation. Not just freedom from her, but from the resentment, the sorrow, and the lingering bitterness. I hadn't even realized I needed closure until I found it. It wasn't a grand victory or some heroic departure. It was simply peace, and that, in itself, was enough. Walking out of that cafe, I felt something shift inside me. A weight I had carried for far too long was suddenly gone. Life didn't miraculously become perfect, and the pain didn't vanish overnight, but something important had changed. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't dwelling on the past. I wasn't clinging to betrayal or heartache. I just felt free. Life after Emily felt unfamiliar at first. It was like learning how to breathe in a new environment. The quiet in the house no longer felt like a void. It became space I could finally breathe in. I began appreciating the small things I had ignored for years. Mornings without chaos. Evenings spent with Jeff, just talking or watching random sports games. I returned to running, something I once loved before everything fell apart. It gave me clarity and helped me sift through the emotional debris Emily had left behind. I poured my energy into searching for a new job, something entirely separate from the life and company we once shared. Starting from scratch wasn't easy. It rarely is, but it gave me a fresh beginning, exactly what I needed. I didn't want ties to our past, to that business, or to the identity of being her husband. I wanted something of my own, and piece by piece that began to take shape. Eventually, I landed a position at a smaller firm. It wasn't glamorous or headline-worthy, but it was solid. The people were kind and grounded, and most importantly, there was no trace of Emily in that space. Starting over brought a kind of value no paycheck ever could. From time to time, I'd catch wind of updates about Emily. Friends who hadn't completely drifted away from both of us would mention her here and there. Occasionally, I'd come across social media posts, not directly from her, of course. She had gone silent after everything unraveled in the public eye, but from people still within her social circle. It looked like she was still moving, just not in the direction she had once envisioned. She had continued on with that man, the one I'd seen in those photos, but based on what I heard, their story wasn't the fairy tale she tried to portray. Still, I didn't feel any satisfaction in hearing that. It no longer held any weight for me. Her life wasn't part of mine anymore. What truly mattered now was how I was putting my life back together. Slowly, piece by piece, I was crafting a life that no longer revolved around her. In doing so, I began reconnecting with people I'd lost touch with. Old friends, relatives, even colleagues from past jobs. I came to see just how much I had withdrawn from the world during our marriage. How deeply I had let Emily take the reins not only in our relationship but in nearly every area of my life. That part of me was over. I refused to go back to living under someone else's shadow. Several months later, when the dust had finally settled, my sister Sarah gave me a call. She had been one of the few who stood by me through everything, even when I tried to shut her out. "I'm in town, want to meet for lunch?" she asked. We ended up at a little diner, one of those spots from our childhood. Nothing fancy, just honest, familiar, and exactly what I needed. As we sat and ordered, she studied me for a moment and said, "You seem different. Like there's something lighter about you. I'm not used to seeing you like this." Taking a sip of my coffee, I nodded. "Yeah, I feel different. It's been a tough stretch, but I think I'm finally starting to heal." She smiled warmly and said, "That's good. You deserve to be happy, Michael. You always have." Her words hit something deep within me. For the first time in ages, I remembered what it was like to just feel okay. I didn't have to look over my shoulder anymore, worrying about what falsehood would come next. As our conversation continued, Sarah brought up a topic I hadn't really considered. "Do you think you're ready to start dating again?" Her question caught me off guard. Dating? It hadn't even crossed my mind. The thought of opening up to someone again was both unnerving and oddly thrilling. "I'm not sure," I confessed honestly. After everything with Emily, trusting someone new feels like a big step. Sarah gave a thoughtful nod. "It'll take time, but don't let what she did stop you from trying. Don't let her take away your chance to connect with someone else." That sentiment lingered with me long after lunch. I didn't know when I'd feel ready, but for the first time I was open to the possibility. Not to replace the past, but to create something new, something without the emotional weight and pain Emily had left behind. The weeks flowed into months, and gradually life found its rhythm again. Work was consistent, friendships felt stronger, and my house, mine alone now, began to truly feel like home. I wasn't haunted by thoughts of Emily anymore. Of course, she crossed my mind occasionally, but not with resentment or sadness. Just like a chapter one had finished reading. One evening, I sat on the porch watching the colors of the sunset stretch across the sky when my phone buzzed. A message popped up. It was from a friend I hadn't seen since our college days. She was visiting the area and wanted to meet up. I looked at the message, reflecting on the long path that had brought me here, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the emotional storm that had once turned my world upside down. But alongside all that, there had also been healing, reconstruction, and a slow, deliberate journey toward a future I never thought I'd reach. Smiling softly, I typed out a reply. "Yeah, I'd love to catch up." It was a small thing, a simple reply, but it felt like the beginning of something meaningful. Emily had belonged to the past, a painful chapter, yes, but she no longer had a hold on what came next. That future was mine to shape, one step at a time. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I truly felt ready to keep moving forward without her.